All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 72 of the Do a Big Shit Today podcast. I'm here with Leon. Hello, Leon. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing dandy. I'm talking to you on this fine Friday.
You're dandy.
I'm dandy.
I like this. There's going to be so many language crossovers where we're going to be like, oh, that's a cool word to say. Okay, I've not heard dandy in a very long time, so I'm great. I'm locked in. You'll get your opportunity when I start throwing out some random English slang from somewhere.
I love it. I've had a lot of folks from, the UK, all over the country, but I will pick up, and this is no diss, I will start to pick up your language as well. So if I start to go and make a little bit of an accent, it's
and we just adopt it. Yeah.
Yep. It's my form of flattery.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have Leon on the podcast today for a multitude of reasons. The biggest one, which I think we should just start with, is the end-to-end documentary that you've released.
Yes, big day, big week. Yeah, it was nice to get it out to the world. Watch me suffer. That's what I should have called it. Not end-to-end. Watch me suffer.
Sufferfest.
Yeah.
Featuring me.
Don't do this. P.S. Yeah.
Oh man. So I have some notes and I'll lay a baby foundation and then you just put all the cherries on top. So
okay, great, go.
So length of the UK is what the end to end is. So that's the length of the UK, end to end. Yeah. Your goal was to run this, which is 1,347 kilometers, 1,347 in 14 days, right?
Or less.
Or less. Thank you. Which starts at John O'Groats, which is a village in Scotland, and ends at Land's End, which is in Cornwall, England.
Oh. Okay. So that's soul down there.
I mean, it was beautiful. I can see why it's called Land's End. It looks like at the end of the world.
Yeah.
But talk to me, because you hit your goal. I'll spoil that alert, because you didn't just hit your goal. You obliterated it. You had, I think, 6 or 7 hours left.
Oh, yeah. I had time for at least a couple of pints and a cigar.
Yeah.
I was cruising, mate.
Yeah, you were. So talk to me about it, because I have questions about how this came to be. But give me, if you were going to be like, hey, Leon, what's end to end?
Okay, so we're doing the elevator pitch.
Yeah, give me the elevator pitch.
Okay, cool. So nice to meet you. What floor are you going to? I can press that button for you.
Thank you.
5. Okay, great. I've only got 4 floors. Cut. This could be tight. So end to end, essentially, John O'Groats to Land's End is the most northern easterly point to the most southerly westerly point. So it's like if you could draw a line across the country, it's the furthest 2 points apart that you could essentially have, and it's traditionally called joggle or le jog, because people do it as like a pilgrimage on bikes. So it's like a really popular cyclist route, or some people will walk it for 30 or 40 or 50 days. And there's supported and unsupported. So this is where you have to be really careful with which territory. And I was technically supported, which some purists hate. They like to just carry their own stuff for a month. Nah.
Yeah.
So the route can be anything. Like mine was exactly 1,347k because that was my route, but it can be anything from around 1,200, I believe, is the shortest you could possibly make it if Strava was actually any good at giving you routes and doesn't end up putting you in a field, all the way up to some people do 2,000, 3,000 and all sorts, and go up through the Cairngorms and hike into different places, and you can do all sorts. But for me, because I was going for 14 days or less, I was like, just give me the most direct, miserable route possible, and we'll do that. And that's it. And you just start up in John O'Groats, really, really unsexy. I always say trail and ultra running is a very granola crowd anyway. You just rock up and everyone looks like, we haven't washed for a week. And oh, cool, let's just go out and run 50k. And then you get back and then everyone just kind of high fives. You might get a random piece of rock or a piece of wood as a medal. And then you just go home and carry on with the rest of your life. It's certainly not the marathon world. Yeah. And then, so you start at John O'Groats, and there's a couple of random tourists there at 6 o'clock in the morning on day one, and it's crap weather. And they're just oh yeah, have fun. never going to see you again. And then off you go. And you just start running. And then you just don't stop. You know, and that's it.
Yeah.
Go and do it. You'll love it.
I mean, you're selling it well. No, it was, I looked up because I wanted to make sure I got the, spelling person over here. I want to get the spelling right. And I saw pictures of like John O'Groats. It's very cute, very, cute Scottish town. But when you picture someone like yourself going for a send off, it's oh, fuck yeah, like balloons and streamers. And it's just John O'Groats. There's like a boat in the background.
Yeah, there's just John O'Groats, the same as Land's End's got a little bit more. But because of John O'Groats is out there. Like I was even surprised. We drove like 6 hours on the second day of traveling to get there. And I was like, come on, I'm in bloody Scotland. And we just carried on going and going. And it's about, imagine like the last actual kind of town where there's anything worth doing is around 15, 20K down the road. So then you go to John O'Groats really just to take the photo of the John O'Groats stand and maybe buy like a pie and some souvenirs, and then you go. There's a couple of campsites, and like we were lucky enough to stay in one of the nice little camper home things, cabins there. But it's not really a place that you go and just stay. It's kind of like if you're going to camp there, you just want to be left alone, and you're like, right, I'm just going to be here for a week on my own.
Right.
Or you just go there to take a photo, and then you carry on with the rest of your trip around the beautiful North Scotland. Yeah.
Yeah. Damn. So backing up just a bit, because I remember in the document you mentioned you were on a treadmill, and the thought of running the length of the UK just kind of popped into your mind. And you mentioned that once you have a thought and you give it space, it's like, fuck the space, this is happening anyway.
Yeah, my wife will tell you how wonderfully inspiring and infuriating it is at the same time. Because it's like I go and have a conversation with her. What about this? Like, oh, for fuck's sake, here we go again. It's never just like a neutral ground. It's just like you're already 80% there. So I've literally just finished my last 250K ultra. So I predominantly do 5-day multi-stage races. And I went over to Jordan and ran the Wadi Rum Desert with Ultra X. So like a 5-day, 250K. And then in recovery, I always do the first week back, as long as nothing's hanging off and broken, I'll do like 40 or 50K just to wind down the legs. Just going from all of that to nothing just feels completely wrong. It's part of my recovery strategy. And I was on the treadmill and I was like in that real reflective state where I feel like you're the most vulnerable to the next stupid thought that comes in, because you're like high on your last win.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, I can do anything. But at the same time, your body's like, just chill out, mate. And then that literally was for want of a better word, organic. It just came in and was like, I wonder how far the UK is. And I was like, I don't know. And then it was worrying about like random little Googles of where do you go and how do you do it, and blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing was like, I'm just going to run the length of the UK in 14 days. And I didn't even know how far it was exactly. I just knew that it was like somewhere between 800 and 1,000 miles. And I was just like, 14 days seems like a nice number. And I think, to be completely honest, the thought in some ways had kind of materialized at that point. But we were also in an era where I was watching Ned Brockman run across Australia, and a friend of mine, Willie Goose, was running across America, doing Transcon. And also as well, and then you've also got Russ, who was running the length of Africa, I believe. I think his might have come slightly after, so I might be wrong in terms of my times. But we were in this era of people just doing epic shit. And no disrespect to any of them, but seemingly looked quite simple and quite attainable, which is quite terrifying. And upon reflection, when I think about running the UK, that I just looked at that idea and didn't even consider it. It was like, well, they're doing 56 days or they're doing 90 odd days, 14. Come on, lad. It's just 14 days. At this point, for context, I'd never run more than 75 kilometers in one go. Mm-hmm. So it was so far beyond what I'd ever attempted. But because of the culture that was growing massively in popularity at the time, it genuinely didn't feel like it was such a big deal. So I was quite nonchalant about it. I was like, yeah, just pop this out next year. Why not?
Yeah. I also do think after a race is where I personally, and I think a lot of other athletes tend to like get in trouble because we're like, they're coming down, you've got the medal, your body's aching for you to like, just shut the fuck up and rest.
Yeah.
And you're already thinking about the next thing. So, and then to be at a treadmill into it where you're really just nothing but pure thoughts. Oh, that was like a formula for
chaos.
Yeah.
And chaos came through. It was chaos and the sequel. You know, the sequel wasn't crap. The sequel was biblically more chaotic. So it was great.
The sequel was freaking awesome. So from having this concept, you made a post about like, I'm going to run the length of the UK. I'm going to do it in 14 days or less. From that point to like getting a van at John O'Groats to start, can you talk about that? Like, cause the logistics of it, the Airbnbs, the team, the finances, like from when you had that thought, cause I think you ran the length of UK in summer of 2023, right?
Yeah, it was July. So the actual video that I filmed, which is part of like the documentary, I filmed that in November of 2022, and it was like a timestamp a bit in some ways because again, like the culture was becoming really popularized. I was also surrounded by a lot of friends and acquaintances that were in this space as well, and it's like there was still a little bit of ownership where I was like, I kind of want to have this timestamp because if I decide to do this in 4 months' time and then launch it, there could be a handful of my friends who have said something similar. You know, so it was like, I need to have this more just to cover my back that I don't look like I'm just copying this dude doing something. We've all got our egos and insecurities when it comes to social media. So there was that. And then the next month was when me and the wife and my daughter at the time came and flew out here to Costa Rica, which is where I live now, for a month's holiday. Just the plan was come out here, figure out where we want to live, because we want to live somewhere else, but we don't know where that is. And obviously, this was where we wanted to live because here we are now. And then we had a conversation about it while we were in our last week of Costa Rica going, I think this is where we'd like to live. And I'm like, on that note, hard right, this is literally it, hard right. So if we're going to live here, how about I say goodbye to the UK by running the length of it? And I'm sat there with my arms up like this. And my wife's like, I'm going to punch you in the face, like legit. And once I had her kind of approval, like she wasn't 100% for it. And I think rightly so. We just decided we were going to move our entire life to the other side of the world. We'd also decided in that conversation that we were going to try for a second child. Aww. And then my daughter was going to be starting school in the UK later that year to then be pulled out essentially by us just a few months later to leave. So there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
And I'm like, I can make it work. I only need 2 weeks, end of July, start of August. And that was basically what she said. She's like, it's not ideal, but I know you and I know that it's going to happen. And I'm either going to say yes, or you're just going to be really annoyed. And we don't like to live with that idea of resentment, right? We've always been a family that were like, just do it, why not? So I found a patch in the diary where it was literally couldn't have been a single day either side of it. It was like, it's a perfect time. This is great. Booked it in. And then, to be honest, like I joke about how hard the challenge was, and it was biblical and all the rest of it. Genuinely for me, both in ego sense, not the unknown of not having any form of control, and everything, the level of stress that I felt from that moment of this is the date, and now I'm reverse engineering the process. Mm-hmm. I've never felt stress like that in my entire life. It was genuinely, it sounds really ungrateful, but it was horrendous. And I would say that when I got to the actual challenge, it was a sense of relief that part was now over, that I don't need to worry about it. So I brought in a good friend of mine, Chris Taylor, who's like a logistics wizard. And he basically planned all of the route, gave me the day-to-day metrics based on what it was that I wanted to average with like 100K. It was like, right, so you need to book Airbnbs or hotels at this location or within 10K of this place, this place, this place. So I'm like, cool. And then I start reaching out at the time. I was a Nike athlete, so I've been with Nike for a while. I'm like, they're going to throw a ton of this. I'm going to be a classic influencer. This is going to be fucking easy. And they didn't part with a penny to support the event.
Seriously?
So this is where the problems began, which was my naivety. And there shouldn't be any expectation. Don't get me wrong. Like I was always just going to go in and go, ask. But if they say no, fine. But I was already signed. I was already completely exclusive. So I was already kind of paid to a certain degree through my other company with my business partner to only wear Nike at the time anyway. So for them, there was no real need. And this was kind of a theme that I found. It was a case of, I was with 3 or 4 different brands and every single one of them were like, well, you can't use something else anyway for just this documentary because you're under contract. So I was like, this was the biggest first, like the big first hurdle was that I presumed that I was going to be able to raise everything that we needed through sponsorships because that was just what my brand was at the time. But nobody stepped up. I think the only thing that I was kind of offered in some ways was a really good deal in many ways from the Urban Ice Tribe guys, who you see very briefly in the documentary. They gave me £1,000 off the $2,000 wedge, which is for the ice bath chiller, and they're like, "Can we have a feature?" And it was like we call it like an energy exchange. And I was like, so essentially, the only sponsor I've got has cost me £1,000. Bustin, which is, to be honest, like again, learnings when people talk to me about doing these events. I'm like, you also have to consider calendar years, financials, and numbers and projections that people have as brands, because one of the biggest problems that I faced was not the fact that brands didn't want to be involved, is that I was asking them within the year in which we were already trading within. So a lot of their budgets were already aligned and set aside for second, Q2, Q3, and I'm asking them in Q1, and you really need to be asking in Q4 or Q3 of the year previous. So that there's so many things like that that were learnings and considerations, and it was good for my ego, to be completely honest, because who am I to expect that people are going to go and pay for this and manage it and make it easy for me in that respect? So that's where I suddenly opened up the old savings and was like, right, we'll just start spending money where we need to. Booked, obviously, a documentary crew to create the documentary, had my logistics lead, Chris, and then also had a really good friend of mine, Josh, who was my masseuse, dad, therapist, everything in between. Everything in between.
Sweet. Yeah.
And he did the entire thing for free. All of it. All I did for him was pay for his accommodation and food, essentially. And even still, I didn't find out until we were nearly finished that he was still buying a lot of his own food because he was terrified at how much it was costing me already. So as a friend, he was already kind of cutting corners. So with that, luckily I had a ready-made camper van myself, which me and the wife had converted. So I had my accommodation and travel, which saved a hell of a lot. Yeah. I wanted a constant, consistent environment, because one thing that I am really heavy in is mindset. And when it comes to challenges, it's not to like a CrossFit term, like RX plus it's I need to be in that constant state of misery, because I'm not very good at shifting between two mind spaces. So for instance, if you put me in 100K of hurt running for a day, and then you put me in a nice fluffy cozy bed in a hotel room, am I getting up in the morning? Fuck no. I'm staying in that hotel because it's wonderful. So when I'm living, existing, resting, sleeping, all in that same spot with the camper van, it was easy. So I booked everything else for everybody else. And very quickly the price just escalated. And then I'm like, I'm now moving the other side of the world. Oh, I've just found out that we're pregnant again with our second child. And you have all of these other insecurities about financial worries and stuff. Yeah. But there was just a wild 6 months. Oh, and I also, 10 days later, at the end of January, grade 3 ruptured my left MCL in my knee at jiu-jitsu fall, which was buzzing. Like if you could think of like a better thing that you could do, I would be surprised. Yeah, just took a fall, and that's where it started. Because every single person in my life and not in my life at the time said don't do it. So like you've just grade 3 ruptured this. It was grade 3 MCL, grade 2 LCL, and a really pissed off meniscus. And that's where my mindset, which I've always had, kind of came in, which was, you said it now. That was it. You said it now, you'll find a way. And in some ways, the naivety and ignorance in that was kind of comes out in the documentary again, not really giving it the respect that it is deserved. So alongside trying to figure all the financials and logistics out, I was then going and paying someone else, a guy called Harvey, to do all of my rehab. Because I'm obviously a sports performance specialist, so I specialize in strength and conditioning and sports nutrition and all of that sort of stuff. But for this, I needed to outsource it. I was like, I'm not taking control of this myself. So he was doing a rehab program until April. And then the team, Chris and my run coach, Sam, at the time said, if you're not running by the end of April, you can't do this. You've got your miles in the bank from last year that we can kind of run off, but this becomes really dangerous if you get too close. So I decided to go and run a marathon in the start of April. And then the following week went and ran a race, a 75K trails, which was utterly miserable. But again, we got it done. And then basically prepped for a marathon and then ran the length of the country.
Jesus.
So, and that was the start of the year, you know. It was a heavy 6 months.
I was about to say, that's a lot, like some really good stuff, you know, like you've got a plan about moving to Costa Rica. You've got, you know, this actual dream that you have of running the length of the UK is coming to be. You fucked up your knee, but your wife like is pregnant with baby number 2. Like that is,
it's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And I wish, I don't look back with regret because I'm phenomenally proud.
You should be.
There's elements of my ego and competitive nature that come out now and go, if you can do it in that time with that prep, what could you do? You know, and that's like a really terrifying door crease to look through. But again, you know, I sit here now and I'm still phenomenally proud of the event and everything that we did leading up to it. And it wouldn't have been the same event and the same result, in my opinion, if it wasn't for all of that stuff that was going on at the same time. Because I felt such a sense of responsibility in some ways and pride, because it was, first of all, the responsibility to not fuck this up when I've put all of my life, including my family, friends, business, financials, everything into this. So there's a responsibility for me to really give this a good go. And then also as well, it was pride because I'd done it myself. And I didn't have a list as long as my arm of content that I had to create for all of these different brands to make sure that I hit the ad campaigns. You know, it was really nice because my reality for 6 years prior to that was everything was paid campaigns all the time. So to be able to just create and relax again, you know, it made for a very different experience, because if someone's coming up to me going, I know you're 80K into your day, Leon, and you're really pissed off, but we have to get this product in, you know, that's not going to go down very well.
Right.
It would have been a very different feel.
Fuck off. Pretty much. Yeah. I very much can see that.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So there's a comment you mentioned in the film, and I personally was curious about this. I mean, obviously I have all these questions, but this one was very interesting and peculiar to me. It's the scene of you sitting in the rocking chair with your blanket, and you call out in the film that like you don't even recognize that person because the level of naivety that you had.
Yeah.
Can you break, is it just because the process or the challenge of running the distance of the length of the UK was so astronomically harder than you thought? Where it was like, who the fuck thinks?
I think we all learn. I think, to be honest, part of this pursuit for people who don't understand why you would go and fuck yourself up and do this sort of stuff to a certain degree, even if it's just mentally and a few blisters physically. People don't understand it when they don't do it. Mm-hmm. But when you do it, I feel like there's always this pursuit of understanding yourself more and learning more. So I feel like for me, my initial entry into ultra was sheer boredom. It was essentially, I've been doing CrossFit for so long and I loved it in many ways, but I also hated it in many ways. And I was just bored. I was turning up, going through the motions, lifting predictable numbers, performing at predictable rates. I could read any WOD or any workout and have a rough idea of how much it was going to hurt, when it was going to hurt, and how long it was going to take me. I'd been a father for 2.5 years at that point, so I was super paranoid that I was going to become the typical dad that just worried about being a provider. And I call it, like we call it weekend hours in the UK sometimes, where you're just dad outside of work hours. And then at the weekend, I'd walk into my city with my daughter and there's just like 50 guys with their kids getting coffee because it's their time and mum's had them all week, So I really didn't want to have that relationship with my daughter. So I was really present with my daughter, stopped working on one of my days every week so I could be with her solely and be, not dependent on the wife's breast or help if something went wrong. Yeah. And through that process, I kind of forgotten myself and forgotten that edge a little bit. So when it first started, it started because I wanted to do something that I didn't know whether I could finish it or not. So fast forward to the point where we're looking at this event, I didn't know whether I could finish it or not. But what I didn't realize is that from all of the growth, from the other challenges that we've done and the other events in which we've gone to lead to that point, I realized it was no longer about just, can I push and dig deep? Because I'd actually been a savage at the other 250s that I'd done at that point. It was more that I didn't realize that I was still looking for something within myself. It was like I needed to accept myself. And it was something that was really profound about the whole experience. And I've only realized it since around 16, 17 days after that event. It was like I was suddenly fully at ease with myself. And I didn't realize I didn't need to prove anything. It's a bit like when you strip back materialism from your life. You spend years getting nice cars, nice watches, the picket fence, lovely house. And then suddenly you have a wake up and you're like, none of that fucking matters because I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. Right. So this event for me felt like a graduation of self because I fully accept who I am in all the good and worst ways now. And it's a shame that it took such that level of breaking down to get beyond all of the layers of ego, excuse, one-dimensional living and pre-existing, beliefs as such that I kind of narratives that I built up over my years as a child and as an adult to get to that rawness of like, but this is what it is. This is all you are now, and there's a point where I'm so reduced to having to walk, which is even worse than running slowly because it's purely there's no escape. It just takes forever. It just takes a long time. And I remember I stopped talking to people, just stopped talking to the crew. And I'm like, I can't seek help outwardly anymore. And it was at that point where the transition and the transformation happened because I just started to speak to myself, communicate with myself, communicate with my pain, communicate with my body. How was I feeling? And who am I? What the fuck am I doing? Why am I doing this? And you start to get answers and stuff because you're capable. And everything was, you're supposed to lead. This is your opportunity to lead people and show them what they can do. It's not about you proving to you what you can do. It's about you proving to the world that they have an ability. And this was like, it all led to me. This was my purpose. It was really, really strange. So that's why, because I look at that person before and I'm like, this is a young, insecure boy who doesn't love himself. And I felt like that documentary in some ways was like giving that kid a hug and saying, it's all right, you've got this. So it was a lot deeper than I'm a little bit cocky on the surface. I always have a little bit of a laugh and stuff, but it was a lot deeper than just like the sentiment of like, this guy just hasn't got a fucking clue what he's doing. There was that.
Mm-hmm.
There was that side of it, but there was a real like growing up process that came through that reduction over the 2 weeks.
Yeah. Do you think, because I'm someone, like, I find I also kind of operate with a sense of curiosity of like, what can I do?
Yeah.
But there's also, I'll be honest, there's a sense of ego for me of like, how far can I push? I have something to prove. I still have that. I'm waiting for it to kind of chill the fuck out. Like I did a 100-miler, which is nothing to the length of the UK, but
Still
I
pretty
very
fucked
much,
up,
it was 3.3 loops. It was mentally like, oh God. And I didn't have anything of that level of realization, but it was just kind of like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what is this? Like, you go to like, what is this for? Am I just doing this for me? And actually the realization after that race came from sitting on my couch with my feet all fucked up, being like, I'm still me. I'm not a different, I've changed. I've learned things about myself, but I'm not a better person. I'm not like a fucking superhero now. I just did something really hard. People do hard things every day. I very much resonated with that because it was, yeah.
Well, I think the thing is, you're like, you've got what I call like a professional athlete's mentality, whether it's, you've done basketball and now you move into running, you're going to be a nightmare in the running scene for yourself because you're always going to have that ego and competitive nature, which is two very, very important ingredients to have when you go out. But one of the hardest things is you have to accept it. And like one of the things that I really struggled with for a long time is because I'm a very competitive person, always have been, whether it's with myself, whether it's with my friends, whether it's with business and colleagues or whatever. And it's always been, especially in the UK, is seen as like a negative. And it's only a negative if you score a goal and then stick your fingers up and go, yeah, fuck you, I'm better. And you make other people feel bad for it.
Yeah.
But you can use, I think ego is a really, really important characteristic to have as long as you manage it in the right way. You filter it in the way it should be, because it's a magic power. Like, and when you get told, oh, ego's bad, it's like taking one of your arms away, especially when you go into the ultra space. Like I coach so many people and I'm like, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, I just want to do my best. No, you want to fucking win. Mm-hmm. And then anything below that is going to be what you deserve on the day. Right. I think it's to go into anything, especially ultra, with like a passive kind of, I'm sorry, kind of attitude. You're asking yourself for trouble and you're taking away some of the big raw grit push attitude that you can really gain power from. And ego is that character. It has to come out. You have to have that animal and go, you know what, you're not going to go and stomp on other people's heads to get there, but you're still going to go out there and give it the best you possibly can. I think it's really important.
Yeah. So from your perspective, being on this, or completing this challenge, you're still doing ultra races. Has your drive changed, right? Because it's not something you don't need to prove anything anymore, right? You love Leon. You're at one with who you are. What's changed? Is that where that ego kind of comes in of like, I still want to like fuck some shit up, but I know who I am.
I think the easiest way to describe it is it's gone from a need to a want. And this race that I've just had a few weeks ago, I was over in Nevada doing a 220K. So it was my first stage race since doing the UK, obviously, because we moved and everything afterwards. And I like to only really race one stage race per year because, logistically, it's a bloody nightmare, trying to prep for them. And I love my jiu-jitsu and I love looking a little bit jacked and lifting weights and all that sort of stuff. And I turn into an empty sack of potatoes when I start training for ultras. I just go all in. So there's a few different things that mean that I only do one race per year. But this race was important to answer that question. It's like, someone asked me, and I was just like, I need to answer the question of whether I can be asked enough anymore. And the answer was, I want to now. It's so nice. Like this race was liberating. I absolutely smashed it. I won my age group. I came third overall. I got my first podium on a stage of the 5 stages. It was finished 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, and then 1st. So like overall, it was a phenomenal race. And I laughed, I joked, I hunted people down, I broke away, I took photos, I enjoyed it. And I came back and was like, that's what racing should be in the ultra space for me. Like, it's an enjoyment factor. And it was something that I always used to struggle with beforehand, because there was such an amount of pressure that was solely placed upon me by myself, that I felt like I needed to do this because people were watching and I needed to prove something. And now it's just like, I've still got the fire, and it's just a case of when it starts to bubble up, I just need to direct it towards the next race that I feel like doing. So yeah, now it's just shifted from a need to a want, which is a nice feeling.
Do you think, because within the documentary, there's a point of view where you're just in so much pain where you have to, like you talked about, you have to walk, right? You're sleeping an hour and a half.
48 hours.
Yeah. Of just walking, because it was just not comprehensible for you to run. And there's, you know, shots of like your feet and Josh like rubbing you out. Like you're clearly just stripped to the bare bone. You're stripped down. Do you think it took that level of like drainage of you as a human to then realize like, okay, we've gone past the hump, we're coming back over the other side?
Yeah, it was the first real time in my entire life where I was fully staring failure in the eyes, like fully staring. Like maybe it's avoidance of doing things that have been hard or could mean I could potentially fail. I don't know, but I've always been naturally gifted physically. So like sport, I pick up a racket and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. Like after a couple of games, like coordination, I've always been kind of okay. So because a lot of my life kind of revolved around sporting environments, I'd never really been in a position where I failed. Like I might lose a game of badminton, but I'd win as many as I lost. And it never really worried. I never really worried into that point. And this was like the first time where I was like, I really don't even know if I can get off the floor right now. And when it got to that point is when I've been massively removed from the challenge. And it was like when people say, like this is a bit dramatic, when they're on their deathbed and you ask people what they want and they just want their health, right? In that moment, I wasn't thinking about the challenge. I wasn't thinking about the sponsors. I wasn't thinking about any of it. I was just thinking, I just want to feel better.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you've only got to answer one question. Do you feel better by stopping now? Or do you feel better by trying and then stopping if you have to? Because it's one defining rules that was prescribed throughout that whole event was that we do not quit when we're laying in the comfort of a space. You quit once you've tried. And it's something that I say with my athletes. If they do a multi-stage, they're going to be all kinds of messed up after 2 or 3 days, both physically, mentally, and spiritually in some ways, unfortunately, for some of them. Yeah. And it's very easy to quit when you're laying in a warm sleeping bag in a tent or you're drinking a hot chocolate around a campsite. That's where comfort calls. I always say that if you just get to checkpoint 1 in 10K time and you're done, I will respect you so much more. Not that that matters, but you will respect yourself so much more, and you've closed that open loop, because it's always going to be an open loop if you quit in camp. Yeah. And that's where, when we were at that point, I was just reduced to the fact of like, what's the point? And it's just like, what is the point? And I couldn't answer that, honestly. And I think it was the fact that I couldn't answer that got me up, because it's like, I need to go and answer this question. And until I've answered that question, I won't stop. And we finally answered it.
Yeah, you did. I noticed that in the film, because you guys talk about that. The rule is don't quit when you're nice and warm with food in your hand. You quit when you've been taped up, you've stretched out, and you're about to start running. That's when you quit.
Yeah,
that's
so gold. Fundamentally important, because at that point, I always get this wrong because of maybe PTSD that I've blocked it all out. But it was around, I believe, 6 or 7 days in. So we were around between 600 and 700 kilometers in. So this is far beyond anything that I've done. And what had basically happened is, for the first time ever in my running career, both of my legs and ankles had swollen up.
Yeah.
So what essentially was happening is I was getting no flexion and extension from my feet. They were so swollen up that the ankle joints just essentially fused. So I'm going, well, I only run. Like, so you've got the ego of just like, this is a running challenge. And it was the first time that I'd had a conversation with Chris. It's like, I feel like a failure because I'm walking. And he was like, the people who do this the fastest in history walk. They're just a lot more economical about the process. You've just basically ran until you have to walk, whereas they started walking early on. So at this point, it was literally I couldn't physically walk, and in order to keep moving, the way that next 48 hours went down was literally got some walking poles, and I walked for 24 hours straight to get 100 kilometers. Then I slept for, like you say, 90 minutes, drove back to the same finishing spot, and then walked again for 23 hours to do another 100 kilometers. And then on the third day of that, it was almost a bit like, in a really soft sense, I was giving myself some active recovery. So because there was no impact and stuff, the body was able to have a little bit of a breather. And then in the third day, around halfway through the day, because we had to make it to the English border by midnight that night, otherwise there was no way we were going to be able to make up the lost time. Chris said to me, do you want to try a little bit of running? And then I tried, and it was searing pain. Like, we're talking, my toes curl when I think about it. It was so painful, because also at the same time as some of the inflammation going down, it's always like when you start to exit that acute stage of an injury is when you start to find out how messed up you are.
How bad they are.
Yeah, and it just felt like my shin was in 3 different pieces. It felt like it was broken. So that caused a lot of paranoia. But then what I had to do was learn to run a different way. So, graphic image, but imagine someone slides a $100 bill between your butt cheeks, and you have to run, but you have to make sure that $100 bill stays between your butt cheeks. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn your feet out and clench your glutes. So essentially, my run then kind of changed from a run to a shuffle. And it's like a waddle. So I started to run in a slightly different way, which then meant that I didn't have to have that classic knees over toes, which then requires so much more flexion through the ankle. It could kind of push out a little bit. It's like, geezer just running down the road. And then from there, it just started to pick up. So we would walk for the first 2 hours, then I would run, and then I'm running by like 20K. And then it just got shorter and shorter and shorter until the time frames were you got up, used the poles for 5 minutes just to have a morning brief chat, and then started running. And the body just transformed. And I think a lot of it was changing the narrative and the way in which we approach the days. But then also as well, this is where the spiritual element, and people think I'm really strange for saying it, there was a real moment where I acknowledged the amount of pain that I was in, which sounds strange, but when we think about pain, it's almost the same as like ego. We instantly go, oh, it's bad. There's pain, I'll go and need to stop. So pain signaling essentially is always going to respond like someone's just ripped your fucking leg off. But it could just be, oh, it's sore. And I look at it and go, pain is a signal for you to take action. Pain isn't the action, because unfortunately so many people feel pain and back away. But some pain is totally necessary in any form of rehab and progression. You think about people who want to build legs up and they do their first squat session. I'm telling you, there's pain when they try to sit on that toilet 48 hours later. But they still go back and squat. But it feels like it's in a productive direction. Whereas when you're doing something that's naturally going to reduce you, pain becomes quite terrifying. But I had this really, and I do this throughout all of my races and preps now. I had this moment where I'm walking down the road and I'm like, this right knee is blown up like a netball. This little basketball is huge. And I'm like, every step is just going, and I just went out loud, like, I see you. I was like, I know you're pissed off, but we've just done another 250K since you started bitching. You're either going to work with me or against me, but it's fine. We're getting this done, and we can get it done together, or we can get it done absolutely hating each other. It's absolutely fine. And it genuinely is like the most psychotic moment in my life when I look back at it, just talking to my knee. But there was, from that moment, I wake up the next day and around 50% of the inflammation in this knee is gone. There's pain, but the pain is manageable. And then my ankles start to move, and then I'm able to run. And it was almost like I talk about it like a petulant, angry child that wants your attention. They'll keep pulling and pulling and pulling on your t-shirt until you turn around and go, yeah, what do you want? And half the time they're just like, they want to wipe a bogey on you and run away. But they just needed you to acknowledge them. You know, it's not that they necessarily need you to do anything graphic. They just need you to acknowledge their existence. And some of the things that I've learned from that situation is pain and discomfort on a mild sense and a chronic sense can, a lot of the time, it can just be the fact that they need acknowledging. You don't necessarily have to do anything about it apart from say, cool, I got you, mate. It's all good.
See you. Yeah.
Yeah. I see you, I hear you. You know, wild.
Yeah. I've tried that mentality with, there was some sort of narrative. There was a man in the States who was flying an airplane, totally paralyzed, and through talking to his body was like coerced it to walk, not eloquently, but just having that. And so while I was doing my 100-mile, my toes were fucked up bad. And it was on a cattle ranch. So anytime it wasn't flat, so you would step and it would just activate all the blisters. And I remember like taking my pulse and just being like, freaking see you, I feel you, like we're good, and just like keep it. So I do think there is something to that, acknowledging the pain for sure.
Yeah, and I also think for context there is it's not a 100% success rate, and I also think there's a position in which that you have to be in order to deal with that and have that as a positive effect. Like I was so reduced that I was clamoring for any form of positivity and hope at that point, I guess. And like if you think about your 100-miler, if the first blister, you're like, yeah, I get it, I see you. It's not going to do anything for you because you're still comfortable. And it's the same. It's like, but then if you repeat the same pattern at 85 miles in, this could feel world changing because I feel like it's like the promotion when you get to the other side. You have to get to that point of like, this really sucks to be able to get those lessons. You know, so it's a case of like some of the tools in which that I use for myself and I use for some of my athletes. They've got different times in different spaces, and I'm like, don't do this until you're really fucked up. Yeah, you know, but you can do this the first time you feel like, what am I doing? You know, because that's where you can get an idea of where their head's at in different spaces of the race.
That's definitely good context for sure. Yeah, it wasn't at mile 1 where I was like, hey, blister 1. It was more at like,
don't lie. It's like you're laying there in a sleeping bag in the morning before going, oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, there's a blister there. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know. It's fine. It's always hard. The hardest part is to get to the start lines. But it's all right, Hannah. We know you struggled. That's fine.
Yeah. It was a rough one. But so at the end of the film, there's the whole scene where your family is there, you have your team there, they're holding a banner for you. It brought full blown tears to my eyes. Cause it was just, you saw the pain that you had. Oh yeah. I was trying to be chill about it next to my husband, but it was very emotional because you felt all the pain that you had gone through.
Yeah.
To finally see the payoff of like, you know, your wife and your daughter giving you cards every day for you to read, to then finally seeing them at the finish line with your family and the banner and all of this. Talk to me about that. How was that like relief level for you?
It didn't sink in for about a month, if I'm honest. Like I always say that my mentality with any form of race and event is the way that I prep people is from the second you step on the start line, that's your graduation. That's your victory lap. Whether it's 50 meters, whether it's a half marathon, or whether it's a 500-miler, that's the victory lap. Because everything in which that the person gains technically from the event is in the process. It's the showing up for themselves. It's the ticking off the sessions. It's having a North Star to work towards. It's the social dilemma of, I've got to run tomorrow, but I fancy a couple of beers tonight, and then making those considerations and navigating life around it. So my thought when it comes to that final day is I just wanted it done. Like I didn't care about, there was no medal, there was no excitement. There was just, I want this thing over now. And I'm the same with all races. Like even on my last prep for this Nevada race, they're asking me in the morning, they're like, oh, are you excited to finish and, you know, the party and get your medal? I'm like, no, I'm fucking done now. I just want it over with. I've gained everything. I've gained absolutely everything that I feel is usable, transferable and exciting from the previous 4 months of sacrifice. You know, this this period of time is easy because I haven't got my work to worry about, my kids or wife or friends or anyone. This is a pie, So I get to the finish line and I'm just overwhelmed, to be completely honest. That it's like, whoa, there's a lot more people there than I expected. About 90% of them didn't have a clue who I was, but everyone's just going, there's this guy who's now going to finish this in one of the top times in history. It's probably worth being here. And they're all standing there and they just see this guy run around the corner in a jiu-jitsu rash guard. I'm like, okay. But it was wonderful to see my family. Very overwhelming. And I'm so funny about emotion when I'm doing events. So like to have the cards and stuff, I think I said it in the documentary, I can't remember. But there's a period of time where I didn't open them because when it gets really rough, again, I manage and modify comfort massively. Sometimes it's really motivational, but when I'm in a position where things are
Is it raining?
It is, and I feel like this office has got a leak. It's not ideal, is it?
It's part of the experience, winning Costa Rica with a built-in waterfall.
They're going to be well chuffed. But when I'm in the middle of like the hurt locker, I really, really don't need comfortable, wonderful conversations and wonderful words because it makes me want to go home. So you'll notice I push all of that away. So then it was like this overwhelming reintroduction of comfort and excitement that kind of buried back in that moment when I got there. And I was just like, what is going on? And then I was just completely delirious. Everyone wants to have a beer and hang out and have some food. And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like, I just need to go to bed, take all of my straps off that I've kept on for like 5 days because I daren't take the tape off. And then it's just this scene of my 3-year-old daughter helping me into the bath, and basically I put all the tape off both my heels, and both heels come with the tape. It's just like, maybe you shouldn't do this again, Daddy. Yeah, maybe not.
This is a good anatomy lesson of skin.
Yeah, it's and how many layers there are or was.
This is the epidermis.
Yes, yeah. This is the bone. Enjoy the heel bone. You'll learn about this one day. So yeah, the last day is like a blur. It should be this.
I bet.
And this is the thing when you talk about romanticizing challenge and races and stuff. You only ever see the end and the medals and the flowers and the high fives and all of that sort of stuff. But it's one of the reasons I have such a respect for athletes who take on such incredible things. Even like a 100-meter medalist, when the general population moan about they get paid all this money and they get this gold medal for 9 seconds. I'm like, you haven't seen the 15 years before.
Yeah,
they don't care about that medal. They care about everything in the sacrifice and the work and they put in before it. So it was not as sexy and as exciting as I would like to say that it was, but it was still pretty powerful.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I'm also with you, like after a race, like I need to mentally just, like I don't party after a race. I can't. Like I just went through like all that shit in my brain. I need a moment to have like a nice plate of food and some silence and maybe a show. Like that's where my brain goes. It's very impressive for folks like let's get messed up, like drink and all this. I can't do that. I hope people enjoy that. But I don't, I'm not one of those either.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I think everybody does anything that they do with passion or purpose for different reasons. And I respect it all. I'm like, if you want to go out in Nevada, we flew into Vegas. I'm like, we're going out and getting wasted afterwards. And I finished the event, go back to the hotel, have a shower, get full intention. I'm like, I'm sending it before I go home. And I go down to the sports bar inside this hotel and have 2 pints. And I'm like, I'm going to go to the shop and get a bag of crisps and a Kit Kat and go to bed.
Yep.
And I was very happy with my decision. And some of the guys went out until 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, respect. This just isn't me.
Yeah, so much respect. So much.
If anything, that's harder than the event. Well done. Especially the next day.
Oh man. So I mean, you touched on this earlier, but like looking at the beginning of running the length of the UK to now, you talk about spiritually, emotionally, physically the havoc that went through on your body. But like what would be your biggest thing if you were to be like put your journey into what you've learned in like 1 or 2 sentences? How would you That's a daunting ass question, I know, but
No, I think it's quite easy in the context of what we're talking about. Would say that the biggest thing that I've learned is that our potential is completely uncapped by anything but ourselves. That's what I believe, like wholeheartedly. You can,
I agree with that.
within reason, you can do whatever you want, but you will never realize how much you're holding yourself back until you do something that makes you go, fuck, I did that thing. And for some people, this is something that I always have to be very conscious of nowadays. It's for some people, that's a 5K. For some people, that's joining a gym, and they've been terrified. Like, I know people who have joined gyms who have wanted to join a gym for 5 years, but they're terrified about that social environment and feeling judged and feeling uncomfortable. So it doesn't have to be something as insane as running the length of the country or doing a huge multi-stage ultra, 100-miler. Like, these are really biblical. They're down the line. They're not like entry level. Oh, fuck, I'm not going to feel like that until I do 100-miler. For some people, it is literally making that decision to move or act upon something that makes them feel almost like that's going to keep them up at night through fear and excitement mixed together. And then they actually do that. When you get down that precipice the other side and go, just did that thing. That's what I think it opens up that uncapped potential, and you realize just how much that version of yourself was holding you back.
Yeah. I also do forget that as well, because I've been fortunate to grow. If you grow up in the world of sports, there's this kind of level of comfortability of walking into a gym. Like, I deserve to be here. I've done it. If you don't have that background, I can see how it could be a very intimidating. That is something you forget about. Yeah.
And also 100%. As well, what you don't realize as well from a sporting background is that a lot of the general population who use a gym, they use it from a position of real pain. They've got to the point whereby they've stood in front of the mirror and told themselves that they look like a piece of shit and they hate themselves, and they've had all of this negative self-talk and they've berated themselves for so long, to the point where I say that for some people, the biggest motivator is being in such an uncomfortable position, and their pain point is so high, whether it be physically, mentally, or emotionally, that they have to act upon it. And it's when you go into traditional gym spaces, which is where I first started as a coach, 80% of the people don't want to be there, but they feel that they need to be there because they're in so much pain mentally, potentially, emotionally, and physically, that they have to do something about it. So if you're in a position whereby you've never been in a sporting background, you've never been to the gym, you've never done anything from a performance element, so you don't ever really even get that payoff, feedback of a medal, a celebration, or anything like that, community camaraderie stuff. And then you're just being told that this is the space that you go to fix that problem when you feel like crap. That you go there and you're surrounded by, the 20% of your vision is people who are nailing it, jacked, in great shape, living their best life, because you're looking at everything that you're not. But what I say to a lot of people is that if you actually look around the gym and you're consciously looking around the gym, 70 to 80% of the people are in the exact same position that you are of discomfort, but they just hide away in the shadows, put a big hoodie on and hide into a corner of a treadmill or a cross trainer, and you're just viewing the world based on your insecurities. So it's a hard environment for people.
I could see that. Do you, and I hope I asked this question right, because I find this to be true, when shit gets really tough, like you're on a long run, personal world, spiritual world, do you feel like you can do more because your threshold of expectations is way higher? Like, oh, fuck this, I ran the length of the UK. Like,
1,000%.
Oh man.
Nothing's as hard as it. Nothing is ever is challenging. Even if I've got, again, when we talk about the logistics of that event, I'm stressed about work, I'm stressed about life, stressed about all these logistical things going on. And I'm like, in comparison, this is annoying, but it's not that. And for a very long time, I really hope that I can live off that for the rest of my life. That I'm like, does it compare to that though? And as long as the answer is always no, then I'm like, great. And if it isn't, one day I'm like, oh, shit, I need to grow up a little bit again, and go into this new space. But definitely, you're 100%. every event that you do, you become more capable. That threshold, that space expands every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that, like, even when I did a 21 miler the other day, and I was like, oh, fuck, this sucks. I'm like, wait a minute. This is 1/4 of what I did. This is manageable. And so because I have that in my back pocket as, like, you know, your mental tricks to push through, I found the shit that I used to think was hard is not actually difficult because I've done something much harder.
Yeah.
So I was curious.
100%. I think when you have the overview perspective, 100%. I think one thing that I will add though is that, and this shocks a lot of people, I can still to this day go out for a 10K and hate life, like absolutely hate it and struggle, because again, there's so much, the context of that challenge and daily life is really important to manage, where I'm like, yeah, but my mentality was preparing and choosing to run that distance every single day. So the way in which that I prepared myself to do that was completely different to going to go and hit 10K because I'm pissed off and I need to get out of the house and I need to do something today. That's a completely different attitude. So I think you can use it within the events and use it when you're in those points of prep where it gets kind of tough. But it's really important for me to echo the fact that still I am an everyday person most of the time, where I'm like, that's still a hard run. And I would still rather have a coffee and a chocolate brownie than go for this 10K today. But it's just a case of the ability to get out the door is easier for me because I've got enough evidence to know that on the other side of it is that sense of completion, pride, well done, and a few achievements, you know.
Yeah. So you may have just answered my question, but what is something you'd want the audience to know about you?
About me, always ask me the question, I would say. Like one thing that I've I say, I don't like the word victim, but I would say that I've fell victim to through my own personality, is that some people think I'm quite one-dimensional because I'm a little bit jokey and sarcastic and I just crack on with things and have a laugh. But I always say to people, just ask me the question, because when I actually have a conversation with somebody, that's when they start to really understand the layers. And like, even if you go as far as looking at the way that I coach people, I have a triangular approach: physical, mental, and emotional. These are the three key components that have to be managed and bolstered as much as possible. And each person has to work on each of those different areas and different elements. And people are very confused when they come into a consultation with me. And I'm not just like this sarcastic lad who's like, let's just go and bang out some runs and hit some weights. It'd be great. And I'm talking about breath work. I'm talking about visualization techniques. And I'm talking about some days where, you know what, you're feeling phenomenally emotional. That's why do you feel like that? Let's explore it. Let's look at the origins so we can understand why you feel like that, how you feel like that, and when you're likely to feel like that again, because there's going to be times in which, if you think about a race, physically, we have to be robust. That's easy. Get that out of the way. But when we have the mentality side of things, we have mental and emotional. And some people think they're the same thing, but they're not. Mental is your grit. It's your why. It's that drive. It's the push when it gets really, really tough. And we have to build that up, because the emotional, unfortunately, in a race capacity, is the negative. It's the comfort. It's the current self wanting us to retreat back to what we're used to. And the mental is what gives us that elevation and graduation to the next stage. So when you start to manage both of those, I'm like, you know what, in the last 5K, if you want to cry all the way home, fucking do it. You've earned it, because mentally you've got yourself to that place where you're allowing that emotion to come out. So some people will cry before an event. Some people will cry during it. Some people will cry and get really emotional and overwhelmed and all of these different feelings, which are beautiful at certain times. But each person has to understand when and how to use those. Because for some people, like for me, if I go to the start line of a 250K race and I cry because I'm feeling really emotional, I'm like, oh my God, we're here. This is great. I can't perform. I cannot perform. But for some people, that's just what they need. They need that inner hug to go, oh, you fucking did it. And then they're like, now I'm mental. I'm ready to kick some ass because I just got that internal hug. You know, so I always say just ask the question, because I'm a lot different in some ways to what people expect on the surface.
Yeah, I guess this conversation is bringing light to that, that it really is three components. Because people talk about the mental aspect of endurance space, especially for running. Because running, running is very simple, right? There's not a ball. There's not really a crowd. It can be, not that it is. It can be simplified. It's just you. There's not really a team performing. So compared to all the other sports on the market, it is a very simplified, it's simple of the sports. And so when it gets that simple, there's more components like mental, emotional, that really do affect your performance.
100%.
Holy shit, man. Very accurate. Very accurate. Yeah. So
I appreciate that.
No, I didn't really think about it till now. Cause when you go on these like long trail runs and you're like, what the fuck am I doing out here? Like you're just you're just going at it yourself, like just mentally. Yeah. It's because you're not in a mental, you got to get in the right space or you're just going to completely deteriorate out there.
Yeah. And also as well, it's not even sometimes, like I always say, like with everything, awareness is the first step, right?
Yeah.
When you become aware of the different types of emotions that you're actually feeling, then you can start to categorize them and put them in the spaces in which, or the columns in which they belong in, right? And then it all has to start with a seed. And like that for me was something that I didn't learn this from anybody else. This was just, I guess, an intuitive thing where I realized the difference between feeling overly emotional and overly mentally driven. Like when I was completely opposite ends of the spectrum, and I'm like, oh, this is all just mentality. But it can become very, very foggy and very confusing and non-directional if you just look at it all as the same thing. And when you actually dissect it, look at it, you'll be out on a run. I can almost guarantee if you think about it more, you'll be out on a run and you'll be going, I'm really not enjoying this anymore. You'll just smile, go, all right, comfort, nice to see you. I've got this. And that's the way that I communicate within myself now. It's like all the feelings, they have their column. Oh, my legs really hurt today. All right, comfort. Oh, let's fucking go. This is a banger of a song. All right, mentality. It's just, you categorize them and you can ride those waves and acknowledge them in the way that they need to be acknowledged.
All right.
Okay.
So question for you. How is Costa Rica? How are you liking it? You're calling in from the jungle.
Well, it's fucking wet today, apparently. How much did I pay for this co-working space? Free shower in my office. Costa Rica's wonderful. It's I feel like as a family, we stepped out of our version of the Matrix. In the UK, I had a successful business with my business partner and best friend, John. Came up in the first wave of social media, had a lovely house, a couple of cars, a home gym, nice Rolex, motorbike, camper van, and a life that a lot of people aspired to have in our circles. But me and the wife would literally look out the window each day and go, we don't have to do much and course correct much for this to be the view that we have for the next 30 years. And that was utterly terrifying and so miserable. And it's no disrespect. Some people love that. Simple life, simple routine, predictable routine. And we just wanted more. It's like, we've got a young daughter at this point who's 3 years old. And I'm like, she inherits this house. She hasn't got to worry about a mortgage and that kind of stuff. Wonderful. But what does she do if she sees us doing nothing apart from the same thing all the time, and living safe, living carefully, protecting the pension? And we're like, no, like we had to do something different. And then you come over to Costa Rica, and it's hard. Like one thing that people get wrong is they're like, you're living in a blue zone, you're living in paradise. And like, yeah, but I have fucking power cuts every single day. And Amazon is a 3-month window, not a 24-hour window if I want something. And you have natural disasters like, we just had some of the worst floods in the last 10 years here. And people were displaced into a bull ring and had to sleep on just foam mattresses for a week because their house was completely filled up with mud and water. And we went over to just volunteer for a bit. And I'm like, this sounds really messed up, but I was like, I'm living. Like the reality of living in a space like this is this morning I'm pulling a scorpion out of my kitchen and goes from being a terrifying, for crying out loud, thank God I've got the spaghetti spatulas to, oh God, it's invigorating. So you're living in a wild environment. And it is very hard in some ways. I've had to learn a new language. We've had to, we essentially packed up 6 suitcases when my son was 8 weeks old, sent my dog over on a freight, which took like 4 days, and then just came here and was like, let's figure it out. And you've got to find a community. I had to find, I lost 50% of my financial income as soon as I came over here because all of my sponsors went, see ya, and you've got to restart a new life. But it feels like when I talk about doing it, people are like, why did you do it? And I say the matrix, but then I also say that I feel like a lot of us get caught up in the chase of what we think is a space that we're looking for, or specifically a community in some ways. And community is a big thing. But the biggest thing that I've realized over my time is that what it is that I'm looking for is an elevation of my mundane. The same shit that I do anywhere in the world. I go to work, I go to the same kind of coffee shop most of the time, I commute back and forth, I take my daughter to school. The difference is the mundane here is elevated because I go to my jiu-jitsu, or I go to my daughter's school, or I come to this workspace, which is currently showering inside, on a quad, right? And I get to do it on a quad most of the time in the sunshine. And that might seem like that's a very simple, non-financially driven thing. But that smile that I have for riding that quad for the 4 miles that I ride it is worth £1 million to me. And then I have to walk the dog every day. But I can walk the dog in the jungle, up the mountains, or at the beach. Whereas I used to walk around the streets on the lead in the pissing down rain. It's still the same things. There's a catalogue of maybe 20 different things that I think that we all do in our day-to-day. And what we wanted to do is we went on this search of elevating those things. So you're doing the same things, but you're doing them in an elevated fashion. So I will work at home on my laptop and I'm sitting on a veranda looking over the jungle and it's 30 degrees rather than sitting in like an office like this and not having a conversation with anyone all day and just having my head down on a laptop. Same thing, different environment.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Dang, that's awesome. Yeah, I liked how you kind of painted that picture. They are very similar, right? Humans, I don't think I've ever had it described to me that way, but that's so accurate.
Yeah, and I would hope that it would, if there's anyone in the same sort of feeling of they want to do something like this or experiment something like this, I would really hope that they really tune into the mundanity of it, because it's the same as when you go on holiday anywhere. In that 1 week or 1 month snapshot, it feels amazing. You're like, oh my God, I could do this every day. But what people don't realize is that when you move somewhere like this and you've been somewhere like this on holidays, very, very different if you are running a business and you have everything else. Because when you're on holiday, the kids aren't going to school, you haven't got to do as much work, you're just having fun, getting pissed and laying on the beach with them. Of course you would love it. So it's a case of what we had to really do was look at this for all of the beauty that it held and dissect it and really simplify it and go, right, so what's the house living situation like? So we've got to live in a house. What's the community like? Because we've got to work around this community. Am I going to be able to do the jiu-jitsu and train like I want to? Is there a gym? All of these things that I do, and how do they feel in comparison to the UK? And we just did this tick list and everything just felt like, you know what, apart from the automation and how slow things can be sometimes here and how hard it can be, like if something happened to one of the kids, it's quite terrifying with the medical system and stuff like that here that you have to navigate. We were like, it's 90% bang on. Everything is elevated, so let's go for it. We can deal with 20% where it feels a little bit terrifying sometimes.
Totally. Looking at the list of pros and cons, figuring out what if the list of pros is more, let's fucking go.
Yeah.
Yep. I feel that.
You only live once.
Well said. All right. Last section of questions, because I do want to be mindful of your time. Okay. These are called rapid fire questions.
My brain doesn't work fast, but we'll give it a bash.
It's okay. So I've asked this question to other folks that are from the UK, and I've been altered to ask it this specific way so that it makes sense. Okay. Because apparently I didn't ask it right. How do you make your tea if you drink it?
With a lot of coffee in it and milk, so I don't drink tea.
So you're not a tea person?
No, if I drink any form of tea, it would be like a ginger tea. It's really, really vanilla. Just hot water in a bag. That's really about it. But yeah, I don't drink tea.
Okay. Maybe this is kind of like, how folks think all Americans, all that we eat are like hamburgers and French fries. There's probably some truth to that. Do you think it's kind of the same thing about how everyone assumes that people that live in the UK or Brits drink tea?
Yeah, I think in the UK there's two labels. You either drink tea or beer. That's everyone. But yeah, no, there's a big tea culture in the UK. But it's just predominantly more Midlands and up north, like Yorkshire area, where good old Yorkshire tea comes from. There's a lot more consumption up that way.
All right. Got you. Okay. Favorite memory so far of this year in 2024? You can give me top 3 if it's too tough.
No, I'm going to be tight. I'm going to go for 1.
Okay.
It was the first time we went to the beach as a family when we arrived here.
Oh.
Because it was a moment of, I remember like visually doing it. I was like, we did the fucking thing. This was terrifying. It's a big deal as a family to do this.
Yeah.
And we just sat on the beach and it was this moment we had a pizza and it was like, we're doing the thing. We're doing the thing that we said we were going to do, but we never truly believed we were going to do it. And that's like a peak moment in my life.
Mm-hmm. Damn, I could see that. I bet that was awesome. Okay, go to breakfast.
A grass-fed beef burger with banana on the side. Not
like
together.
a full... Okay,
no,
that's about to be...
no, bunless.
Holy shit. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just have like this morning's breakfast was a grass-fed burger. No, nothing, just naked. Just
Got
mini.
it.
And then I had a banana. It's great.
All right.
And a cup of coffee.
Damn.
I just had the collective switch off of the whole vegan culture who's probably been loving this podcast. Just gone, fuck you, dude.
No. I think...
Screw this guy. He was doing so well, and then he said he had a burger for breakfast.
No. I can guarantee you this podcast does not give a shit if you have a burger. I hope not. I don't think so.
Yeah, so that would probably be like my go-to at the moment. That or like 5 poached eggs and some honey and banana.
Okay. When you first delivered that, I was picturing a burger, like meat, bread, and a banana in there, and I was like, for the love of God, man.
Yeah,
but now that you elaborated, it makes more sense.
Yeah, no, I get a lot more stick for my eggs because if I have scrambled eggs, I have scrambled eggs with raisins or blueberries within the eggs. That look is, that's not uncommon.
Oh.
And my dipping sauce is honey in that rather than traditional ketchup.
Okay. I mean,
I think I kind of just, maybe what happened is my wife was pregnant and I just adopted her cravings and just kept them. That's probably what's happened. Some women decide to sniff car tires throughout pregnancy and go, God, this smells fantastic. I need to eat that. And some guys, just decide to eat eggs and raisins.
Eggs and raisins. I don't think I've ever had that combination be put together.
Your life's about to change
All right.
You're welcome.
I'll see if my husband will eat that.
I think he's probably about to kick you out if you walk up to him and say, can we have eggs and raisins for lunch?
Raisins? I mean, I think shit happens like in food culture where like you have a big ass plate of food and then your food touches and then you eat a spoonful of like, oh, I have some raisins and some eggs. Someone's like, damn, that was actually really good. And then it creates these combos.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite thing to do on a quote unquote rest day?
It's probably go to the beach. But I would genuinely, this is where I sound like an elite dude, which sounds stupid. But I like to go for a run. I genuinely do. Like a run in the sense of there's no prescription. There's no, I've got to do this or I've got to go for that long. Don't even take headphones. I'll literally just put my phone in my pocket in case I need it. And I just go out. I'm like, I'll be anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour and a half and just go out and sport. Like that for me on a rest day. I'm not running fast. I'm not running hard. I'm not running to any form of stress. That for me is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah. I bet also in Costa Rica, you get to see some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Crocodiles and monkeys around. And scorpions.
Do you bring anything for the crocodiles? They're not aggressive, It's like you don't, or are they? You raise your eyebrows.
I haven't spoke to him that much recently, but
No?
I did
Okay.
get told 2 months ago I did a loop, which required one thing that you find in Costa Rica is that most roads, when you go trails, it's not like they'll cut through. It's like one way where you go back. And I went on one loop, which I'd never ran before, and came to a river mouth. And I was like, fuck's sake, I don't want to get soaking wet. But if I go across this river mouth, the run finishes in 3K, and I'd already done 20 odd at this point. Or if I go back, I've got to do another 9 kilometers to get back to the same cross point on the other side. And I had to pick my daughter up. So I used all of these justifiable, in my mind, reasons to cross the river. The river's like 7 meters wide. And I start walking across, and I'm like, I know that there's crocodiles in this river, but they're normally like further north. So I have this stupid internal justification system going on. Like they're just staying at that end of the river. They're not coming this way. And it gets up to my hips. And then I'm like halfway across the river in this sheer panic of like, fuck, I've got here through the conversation. And I'm like, now I'm in the middle of a river and there's crocodiles in here. And I get across the river and get out, luckily. And I spoke to my professor at jiu-jitsu the day afterwards, and I was like, oh, this run was such a pain in the backside. I had to cross the river at so-and-so. He was like, Leon, it's mating season. There's like 4 5-meter bull crocodiles in that river at the moment. It's like, how you didn't get attacked by a crocodile, I have no idea. And since then, it's been quite an uneasy feeling that still lives with me to this day. So yeah, they're not friendly.
Okay.
Most of them are just small enough that you wouldn't have any problems with them, but dogs get eaten and all sorts by them all the time.
Okay. I mean, we have like crocodiles in Florida where you see like videos of like just them coming at you, but it's usually after people like throw shit at them and like disturb their peace. But
yeah, that's asking for trouble.
Yeah, you're in their land at that point. So yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
if you're underwater, you're screwed.
Yeah. All right. Last question. What are 3 things that you're grateful for?
Oh, that's a hard one. First one's probably controversial because I can almost guess what people say here. Grateful for my family, which I am. Now, I probably disrespected so many people. I apologize. Something that you learn about me very, very quickly is that I try not to answer one-dimensionally if I can think about it. So as soon as you said that question, the first thing I'm going to say is I'm grateful for myself, which is a really hard point to get to for a lot of people in life because it sounds really self-indulgent and selfish. But I always say that there's a reason that they say on an aeroplane that if something happens, you put your own mask on first before you go to help others. And this is something that translates across my business, my family life, my social requirements, even this having this podcast today. If I wasn't grateful for who I am and didn't fill my cup up, I'm not showing up for anyone in my life, whether it be my clients, my wife, this podcast, with the respect in which that you deserve. So if I was just like, didn't care about myself, I would show up to this podcast sitting in a bloody car park in my car. Go, screw it, it's fine. It'll be good enough. I won't bring proper headphones. I won't hire out space to do it. And it's because I'm grateful enough to myself and I'm able to fill myself up enough that then I can look at all the other aspects in my life and go, right, what does that person need from me? What does that person expect from me? And I'm not going into it tired. So it's kind of like my justification for I'm grateful for myself because everyone else who gets me, they get me at my best because I look after myself first. So there's that. And then I always say, like, it's a bit of a classic, but I am very grateful for my body and my health and what I've managed to create and do with it because I genuinely, hand on heart, believe that a lot of my mental health is managed by my physical health. There's obviously lots of different studies that have huge correlations nowadays, but training and my body has got me through some of the hardest times in my entire life. So I don't need to be on my deathbed to say all I want is my health, because without that, I'm in a really rough point. And then the third one would be again, a little bit niche, but my immediate family. And by my immediate family, I mean my family under my roof. Everyone's got their 17th cousin removed 6 times and from Jill in Barbados. But, it would be disrespectful to my close-knit family if I was like, I'm grateful for my family because half of the people in my family I've probably never even met. There's always going to be cousins somewhere. But it would be it'd be my wife and my children and my dog, because they're the people that I spend the most time with. And the people in which you spend the most time with is all these business gurus say, you are a product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to earn money, fuck your friends and hang around with rich people. I mean, all right, but I'm good here. It's all of the ways in which that I interact, action, and do in the world is either as a byproduct of their positivity or their criticism and support in some ways. So my immediate family would be my third.
Lovely. That was it. That was dandy.
That was absolutely dandy.
Dandy.
The rest of my day's going to feel, I feel like my day's going to feel dandy now. I feel like I've
set it up.
I've set it up in a good way. Yeah.
Well, that's the podcast, man. You smashed it. You totally crushed it.
That was good fun. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to link the website for the documentary. I think I have it. It's in the document I have, but I'll make sure it's the right one. Because I really, I want folks to see this too. You did such a great job. Your team did amazing. It's a really cool film. So
yeah, it's biblical. I'm very proud of the product, and I'm someone who's a creative. I edit, film, direct, all of that sort of stuff myself. And I've done it for so long that it's really hard to be proud of a product that you didn't create. You were just in. So it's really nice. Yeah, it's really nice to look at it and go, yeah, well done, boys. You did a good job.
Mm-hmm. Plus, in when you're 75 and walking around still doing amazing things, and people are like, "Oh, you ran the length." You're like, "Yes, you want to see? You have a full blown
film." Flick it up from I just have to put my hand out at that point and go, "Look, this is it," and push towards their face, and then they've just got the Matrix moment. Like, oh my god, I've now seen your feet.
Exactly.
At that point, they never even. Oh my god, I probably never even have to watch it. It'll just be like can you download end to end and all of the major subject matter into my brain now as a memory?
Oh God, that's frightening.
Here you go, Stephen. God, it doesn't even feel that far away. Christ. Anyway.
I hope that doesn't happen. You might be right, but that just freaks me the shit out. Oh God. All right, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. So yeah, likewise. I'll keep you posted. Oh, thanks. But yeah, let me stop hitting record.